August 18, 1990, 6:12 a.m., Cochise County, Arizona. A rancher near North Kansas Settlement Road sees an aluminum tail number in cracked mud. The drain stock pond sits 3.6 miles east of Wilcox Playa. The number matches a Cessna that left Sierra Vista the previous afternoon. Pilot, Nora Vale, 38. Destination, Tucson. No arrival. No mayday. What happened to Nora and the rescue lion aboard her plane? 20 years later, in 2010, a deeper drought will force the rest of this story into view. One detail at the scene should not exist. Deputies string tape around the pond as the sun lifts. A single door window is punched out from the inside. The cargo hatch gapes, but the hinges are intact. The propeller is bent, not shattered. That points to power at touchdown, not a high-speed crash. The fuselage sits level, nose low, like a pilot tried to set it down and ran out of distance. The tail number is clear enough to end 2 decades of rumor, but it solves nothing. It opens the first required question. Nora Vale knew these routes. She moved animals between sanctuaries and small zoos across the state. Her flight plan placed her over the Sulphur Springs Valley at 5:41 p.m. Radar later lost her without an emergency code. No storm cells. Light winds. A routine evening hop. She also had enemies. Money follows rare animals. So do shortcuts. Erin Vale drives in from Phoenix after the call. She was 22 when her mother vanished. She is 42 now, standing on sun-baked clay and trying not to look at the cockpit glass. Sheriff Dane Porter briefs her in clipped phrases. No human remains in the pond bed. No obvious fire. A canvas strap near the hatch. Tension marks suggest weight was dragged, not thrown. Victor Hale arrives an hour later. He was the investor who kept Nora's operation afloat, then took it over. He stays outside the tape and asks about closure. He does not ask about distance to the nearest cover or water. He does not ask about tracks. A single object in the mud will pull this case forward. It was not supposed to be there. Nora Vale was not a hobby pilot. She logged over 3,200 hours, most of them on short hops across southern Arizona. She ran animal transfers for sanctuaries and small zoos. She filed flight plans. She stuck to maintenance schedules. In 1989 she formed Vale Rescue Partners outside Sierra Vista and brought in one investor, Victor Hale. He covered deficits and pushed public events. He also tightened control over money, permits, and press. Erin Vale was 22 when her mother disappeared. She handled intake records and transport manifests. She knew which crates moved where and why. She also knew her mother had confronted Victor about off-book animals months before the flight. Their argument was private, but the fallout was visible. Victor handled donors. Nora handled the field. Staff were told to route questions only through him. Publicly, Victor praised Nora's skills. He organized the memorial in 1991 and spoke about dedication and sacrifice. Privately, he expanded the ranch from 220 to over 800 acres by 1994. He installed perimeter cameras and a new quarantine barn that required keycard access. He rebranded the operation and formed a new non-profit board with himself as chair. Erin resigned within a year and moved to Phoenix. She said the mission had been altered. She did not elaborate in the press. Nora's network included veterinarians in Wilcox and Douglas, 2 freight brokers in Tucson, and a volunteer pool of 6 pilots. None reported missed payments or late paperwork before August 1990. Her Cessna had no outstanding airworthiness directives. Her last annual inspection cleared 3 weeks before the flight. If she planned to run, she would not have left a clean paper trail. There is another layer. 2 months before Nora's flight, a federal seizure in Louisiana placed several big cats into state custody. Records show at least 1 breeding pair went missing during transfer. Erin later told detectives that Victor had talked about opportunities created by failed enforcement. She called it a warning sign. If you want more cases broken down with dates, documents, and evidence chains, subscribe and stay with this investigation. When the plane surfaced in 2010, Victor arrived fast, but a much older signature already placed him in her story. Deputies logged the pond scene at 7:02 a.m. The Cessna sat nose low in drying clay. The left cabin window had a blowout pattern from inside to out. The cargo hatch hung open on undamaged hinges, which meant someone unlatched it. The propeller showed two smooth bends, not shattered tips. That fit a low-speed, controlled touchdown. There were no scorch marks, no spray field of debris, and no sign of a cartwheeling impact. Sheriff Dane Porter marked a 60-foot ground scar from the nose wheel to the tail. It ended clean at the bank. Whoever landed here tried to keep the plane intact. Investigator Carla Ruiz photographed claw-like scratches on the inner cargo frame. The gouges ran parallel, for at a time, consistent with a large cat without claws. A web strap lay half-buried beside the hatch. Its cam buckle showed tension scoring but no tear. 10 feet forward, technicians flagged a cracked leather collar with a brass nameplate. The buckle tongue was pried up by a thin blade, not snapped. Mud preserved fibers along the edge that looked like denim. Erin Vale watched from the tape line. She gave Porter the aircraft maintenance file and Nora's last 3 transport manifests. The airplane's annual had cleared on July 26, 1990. There was no open airworthiness directive. Nora logged a test flight on July 30 with normal engine temps. Ruiz opened the cowling and found old tool marks under newer pry damage. They ringed a fuel line clamp. Age could do that. So could hands. Dr. Alan Pierce met them at the Wilcox Clinic with a diagnostic reader for the collar's tracker. The unit was outdated, but the memory chip mounted tight. He downloaded coordinates and plotted them against USGS maps. Day 1 showed movement at roughly 2 miles per hour from the pond to higher ground. Days 2 and 3 circled a shaded draw within a 100-meter radius. Day 4 spiked to short bursts near 15 miles per hour, then cut out abruptly. That suggested removal, not battery death. Pierce swabbed the collar interior under magnification. He found 2 blood patterns with different absorption ages. He also tweezed mesquite bark and a single blue fiber. Erin kept her eyes on the open hatch. She asked one question that stopped the room. If they walked away, who found them first? Dr. Alan Pierce treated the collar like a crime scene. He dried it under low heat, then opened the tracker housing. The unit was a late 1980s model with a removable memory chip. He photographed each step and logged times. At 2:11 p.m., he extracted coordinates and timestamps. He warned about accuracy. These devices drifted up to 50 meters. Battery life rarely exceeded 6 days. He plotted the data on USGS topo maps for Cochise County. Day 1 showed a steady line from the pond rim to higher ground, about 1.1 miles. Average speed was near 2 miles per hour. That pace matched an injured animal paced by a human. Days 2 and 3 clustered in a shaded draw east of North Kansas Settlement Road. The movement stayed inside a 100-meter circle. That suggested shelter or water. Day 4 changed. The file showed short bursts near 15 miles per hour on a heading to the northeast. The signal stopped at 6:17 p.m. There was no slow fade or intermittent drop. It cut as if the unit had been removed. Pierce swabbed the collar interior. The lab at Wilcox Clinic could not type blood, but it could index age by absorption. One pattern formed fine spray, older and set. Another pattern formed distinct drops with later absorption. He scraped the buckle channel. He recovered mesquite bark fragments and a single blue cotton fiber. Under magnification, the buckle tongue showed pry marks from a thin-edged tool. Investigator Carla Ruiz compared the final coordinates with county parcel maps. The point lay 3.2 miles from the pond in a box of low bluffs. The parcel boundary belonged to the Vale Ranch in 1990. It transferred to a Hale Shell Company in late 1991. She flagged the deed. Sheriff Dane Porter examined the Cessna again. The cowling held old tool scars under fresh pry damage from recovery. The scar circled a fuel line clamp. He noted the pattern and photo-documented each mark. He also requested FAA copies of any last-minute cargo amendments. The file returned a single page, timestamped 1 hour before takeoff. The number of animals jumped from 1 to 12. Erin stood over the topo map. She tapped the cluster in the drawer. She said Nora would have aimed for shade, then water, then a line of sight. The last ping sat on land. Victor later declared off-limits. The scene began to argue with the original story. The cargo manifest Nora filed at 3:42 p.m. listed 1 animal for transport. An addendum at 4:38 p.m. expanded it to 12. The Cessna type certificate could not support that load with fuel to Tucson. FAA clerks do not change manifests on their own. Someone asked for that change. Sheriff Dane Porter's team documented the airframe. The left cabin window was punched outward from inside. The cargo hatch swung open on intact hinges. A web strap lay beside it with scoring on the cam buckle. That showed tension and release, not tearing. The propeller blades were bent in smooth arcs. That meant power at touchdown and a deliberate landing. The cowling carried older tool scars near a fuel line clamp. Fresh pry marks from recovery sat on top of those lines. Age can score metal, hands do it faster. Investigator Carla Ruiz pulled county deed records. The box canyon that matched the tracker's last ping was Vail family land in 1990. It moved into a Hale Shell company in December 1991. The price was low. The transfer had no loan filing. Victor called it consolidation when reporters asked years later. Erin remembered it as the place he posted no access signs. Dr. Alan Pierce recovered coordinate history from the Lion's Collar. Day 1 tracked 1.1 miles from the pond to higher ground. Days 2 and 3 circled a shaded draw within a 100-meter radius. Day 4 spiked near 15 miles per hour on a northeast line and then stopped at 6:17 p.m. The memory did not fade. It cut clean, like the collar was removed. At the shaded draw, searchers found a small woven shelter under a lip of rock. Empty plastic bottles were sun-clouded but intact. On the stone, faint letters read, NVD 2-leg hurt. 10 yards away, 4 parallel gouges tracked across soft sandstone at shoulder height. The claw pattern fit a large cat without claws. Half a mile from the plane, technicians lifted a single boot print set in old baked mud. A decorative star stud was embedded in the heel. Erin recognized the style. She had seen it at fundraisers. The first physical evidence of survival now pointed to a specific direction and a familiar set of boots. Nora Vail's profile shaped the first pass at the scene. She was 38, instrument-rated, and conservative with fuel. Her Cessna's last annual cleared on July 26, 1990. Her log showed no deferred maintenance. She left Sierra Vista with 1 documented animal. The amended manifest an hour before departure raised flags that would matter later. The crash site looked more like a forced landing than an impact. The propeller bends were smooth. The nose gear carved 60 feet of drag, then stopped at the bank. The left window blew outward, consistent with someone pushing from inside. The cargo hatch hung open on working hinges. A web strap beside the hatch held come scoring from a heavy release. The cowling carried older tool marks near a fuel line clamp under fresh pry damage from recovery. It suggested hands were in there before the pond swallowed the aircraft. Half a mile northeast, searchers entered a shaded draw matched to the tracker cluster. Under a rock overhang, they found a small woven shelter. 2 plastic bottles lay sun-clouded but intact. On the stone face, faint letters were scratched, NVD 2-leg hurt. Signal tomorrow. 10 yards away, 4 parallel gouges scored soft sandstone at shoulder height. The pattern fit a large cat without claws. A darker stain along the rock shelf tested heme positive in a presumptive field test. The line of travel continued toward a box of low bluffs. Near the mouth of a pocket canyon, Deputy Carla Ruiz saw fabric on a thorn branch. It was khaki ripstop consistent with flight pants. Beneath a fallen slab, she recovered a weathered leather bag. The flap bore NV'd in faded gold. Inside were a pilot logbook, a disposable camera with heat damage, and a microcassette recorder with a corroded battery door. The tape inside looked intact. Evidence tags, fixed times and GPS for each recovery. At the narrow end of the pocket, technicians flagged bones from a large animal. Not human. A copper-jacketed slug sat lodged in a cervical vertebra. Nearby, they lifted a single boot print set in old baked mud. A star-shaped heel stud matched the earlier impression from near the pond. The victim's field decisions were etched into rock and plastic, someone else's decisions were hammered into metal and bone. The first interview that moved the case came on July 28, 2010, at the Cochise County Sheriff's Office. Gabriel Soto, 56, asked to speak off camera but on the record. He worked at the Vale Ranch in 1989 and 1990 as a mechanic and animal tech. He quit 6 months after Nora disappeared. He brought a spiral notebook he said he kept then. Sheriff Dane Porter reviewed his ID and took a sworn statement at 9:12 a.m. Soto said he saw Victor Hale at the Sierra Vista hangar on August 17, 1990, at about 1:30 p.m. He described Victor lying under Nora's Cessna with a socket set that did not match the plane's tool roll. He remembered a fuel smell and a rag-soaked brown. He also remembered Victor's boots. Black, with decorative star studs at the heels. Soto said he was told to leave and come back after 3. He left. On August 20, 1990, at 8:10 a.m., Soto drove Victor to the Wilcox Veterinary Clinic. Victor's right forearm and shoulder were wrapped in gauze. He said a fence wire tore him while checking an enclosure. Dr. Lowell Griggs, now deceased, irrigated the wounds and placed multiple sutures. Soto paid cash at Victor's direction. He recognized for parallel tracks in the skin under the bandage when Griggs changed dressings. He said those tracks did not look like wire. Soto also described a private airstrip on the Hale side of the ranch. He lived close enough to hear night traffic. On August 23, 1990, around 12:40 a.m., he heard a light aircraft land without lights, then depart before dawn. He arrived to work at 7 a.m. and saw fresh concrete being poured behind the old feed barn. He remembered Victor calling the project a pad for future storage. Soto identified the star-stud heel in a photo of the boot print recovered near the pond. He pointed to a mark on the cast that matched a chip in Victor's right boot present in 1990. He also turned over a photocopy of a map he said he made during the search. Red X marks showed the same bluffs where the collar's final ping landed. He said Victor told crews that area was unnecessary due to wind drift. When Porter ended the interview at 10:31 a.m., he asked one follow-up. Soto nodded and said there was something else that never made the memorial speeches. Sheriff Dane Porter reopened every log that touched Nora Vale's flight. The amended cargo manifest at 4:38 p.m. made no operational sense. The Cessna could not carry 12 listed animals and fuel to Tucson. FAA recorded the amendment from a ranch office fax line registered to Hale Livestock Holdings. The original signatory was Nora. The addendum signature block used a different pen pressure and slanted right, not left. Civil Air Patrol sortie records showed grid assignments from August 18 to August 28, 1990. Crews flew west and south of the pond. The bluffs to the northeast never received an aerial grid. A briefing sheet attributed the skip to prevailing winds, citing a forecast Nora did not file. The author line was typed V. Hale, liaison. Porter verified with the wing commander that Hale had no cap roll. Fuel receipts contradicted Hale's public timeline. A self-serve pump at the Benson Municipal Airport logged a 17.3-gallon sale at 10:11 p.m. on August 17 to a Hale account card. Tower tapes were limited, but the CTAF recording captured a male voice reporting pattern entry at 10:19 p.m. The voice used the Hale Strips call sign, not Benson's. Private strips do not file with towers. Someone wanted that call on tape anyway. Investigator Carla Ruiz audited Victor's injuries. The Wilcox Clinic's ledger listed a tetanus booster and 35 sutures at 8:27 a.m. on August 20th. The intake note read lacerations consistent with large animal, then crossed out and replaced with fence wire. The handwriting changed midline. Ruiz photographed the page under raking light. The original phrasing showed through. An anonymous caller reached Erin Vale at 6:42 p.m., July 29, 2010. The voice was altered. The caller said to check veterinary logs for August 20th and look behind the feed barn concrete. The caller also said to request FAA microfilm for a second cargo amendment that night. Porter ordered the reels. They arrived with one frame spliced out. The splice number matched a missing page entry on the FAA index. Pierce and Ruiz matched the tracker's day-for spike to the box canyon on deeds that shifted to a hail shell in December 1991. A surveyor stake still sat at the rim. The metal head showed pry marks under silt. It was not wind. Hale's public story moved searchers away, the physical trail kept pulling them back. Beneath the concrete, what story was sealed in on purpose? Porter widened the search beyond the canyon. He subpoenaed Hale Livestock's ledgers from 1989 to 1992. A $48,500 cash withdrawal posted on August 22, 1990. The memo line read yard upgrade. A contractor in Wilcox confirmed a rush order for ready-mix concrete that same night. Delivery ticket timestamped 2:14 a.m. He remembered floodlights at the feed barn. Benson Municipal Airport released card logs. Hale's account paid for avgas at 10:11 p.m. on August 17th and again at 4:02 a.m. on August 23rd. The night manager recalled a pickup with a covered bed and a man with a bandaged arm. Receipts showed the same pump and lane camera. The camera was analog, but the cashier wrote arm wrap in the shift notes. Ruiz pulled pager and landline records. A Hale office line called the FAA flight service station at 4:35 p.m. on August 17, 2 minutes before the cargo addendum. A second call hit the same number at 9:57 p.m. No reason was documented. A long-distance call to a freight operator in El Paso followed at 10:29 p.m. The operator later identified Hale's voice and a request for unlisted runway lights. Pierce obtained a 1990 Landsat pass. The August 24th scene showed a fresh rectangular scar behind the barn. The soil reflectance matched new concrete. A second rectangle appeared at the private strip's south end. That feature was not present in July. Survey maps from December 1991 labeled both pads equipment. Farm photos from a charity brochure in 1992 showed roses planted over the first pad. Forensics revisited the copper-jacketed slug from the animal remains. It gauged at .45 caliber with lands and grooves consistent with 3 common models. Cochise County had recorded Hale's purchase of a .45 in 1985. He renewed his carry permit in May 1990. A gunsmith in Tucson logged maintenance for Hale on August 27, 1990, to replace a barrel bushing. Ruiz traced the star heel studs. A boot shop in Tombstone sold a limited run with a distinctive 5-point profile. Sales records showed one pair to Victor Hale, size 11, on June 3, 1990. The clerk remembered Hale asking for replacement studs in case one pops. Finally, a lab report on the collar's denim fibers came back. The thread count and dye profile matched a brand Hale wore in photos. If the ledger told a story, what would the camera in Nora's bag add next? A Cochise County grand jury returned a sealed indictment on January 12, 2012. Counts included first-degree murder, tampering with evidence, wildlife trafficking, and fraud. Judge Meredith Cole signed search and arrest warrants at 6:40 a.m. Deputies served them at the Hale Ranch by 7:15. Victor Hale opened the door with his right arm scarred. He surrendered a .45 he said was for predators. Ballistics swabbed the muzzle and seized the barrel and bushing. Agents impounded accounting servers and a set of leather ledgers from the office safe. Chain of custody began at 7:42 and never broke. A concrete coring team worked the pad behind the feed barn. Cores showed older aggregate at the center, newer skim at the edges, and microscopic fibers consistent with plastic sheeting. In a second pad by the private strip, ground-penetrating radar flagged voids and metallic anomalies. Excavation halted until the defense could observe. At arraignment, Hale pled not guilty. Bail was denied due to flight risk and witness tampering concerns. The defense moved to suppress the trackers, the FAA microfilm, and the clinic ledger. They argued Fourth Amendment violations and hearsay. Prosecutor Dana Pierce walked the court through each warrant, each tag number, each signature. The judge allowed the GPS collar and the ledger. She reserved ruling on the microfilm splice. Pre-trial disclosure brought a surprise. A tape recovered from Nora's weathered bag had been restored. The court scheduled a Daubert hearing. Audio expert Ian Mallory documented chain of custody, tape baking, azimuth alignment, and noise reduction. Spectrograms isolated 2 distinct male voices and 1 female voice. 1 male matched Hale's known samples within accepted forensic thresholds. The defense objected to partial provenance, noting sections recorded over. The judge ruled the admissible portions would go to the jury with limiting instructions. A second surprise came from the Tombstone boot shop. The owner produced a paper envelope labeled Hale, Spares. Inside were 3 5-point heel studs and a receipt dated August 21, 1990. Latent prints on the envelope matched Hale's left index and middle fingers. The defense said he repaired boots often and the studs proved nothing about location. On March 5, 2012, the court consolidated state homicide counts with federal wildlife charges. Jury selection would begin in 30 days. Would the voice on Nora's tape hold when the cross-examination starts? Jury selection began April 9, 2012, in Bisbee. By April 12, a panel of 12 and 4 alternates was sworn. The court seated them for a joint state-to-federal trial. Venue stayed in Cochise County with federal counts tried by consent. Judge Meredith Cole instructed on felony murder, trafficking, and conspiracy. Opening statements were brief. Prosecutor Dana Pierce promised a timeline anchored by documents, locations, and voices. The state called the records custodian from the FAA first. He authenticated the amended manifest filmed in microform, timestamped 10:02 a.m., August 18, 1990. Defense renewed its objection. The court admitted it with limiting instruction. Next, DPS Sergeant Abel Renteria mapped the GPS collar path with survey-grade coordinates. He tied the last signal to land within Hale's known grazing allotment. A boot print examiner followed. He matched 5-point heel studs recovered near a box canyon to the Tombstone receipt and spare studs with Hale's prints. Audio expert Ian Mallory took the stand on day 3. He outlined baking temperature, capstan speed, and azimuth alignment. He displayed spectrogram overlays and voice biometrics. The female voice identified herself as Nora. A male voice ordered leave the camera. The second male voice used phrases Hale repeated in recorded jail calls. Defense challenged contamination and bias. The judge admitted the segments that met reliability standards. A former ranch foreman, Elias Mendez, testified under subpoena. He described Hale's quarantine barn, off-books transports, and a night flight landing without lights on August 22, 1990. He produced a notebook of loads and destinations. Pages showed cash totals and initials that matched ledger entries. Cross-examination raised his prior theft charge. He admitted it and said Hale paid the fine to ensure silence. Forensics returned to concrete. A geophysicist explained ground-penetrating radar voids beneath the feed pad. A coring specialist described plastic fibers and diatom profiles inconsistent with native soil. Anthropologist Dr. Karen Chu identified commingled remains and explained why DNA was partial but sufficient to include Nora as probable. The court barred autopsy photos and used diagrams only. Hale chose to testify. He called the tape theatrical and said he rescued predators. On cross, Pierce introduced his boot shop receipt, vet clinic suture count, and a 2004 donor letter citing rare white stock. Hale's answers drifted, then contradicted prior statements. Deliberations lasted 6 hours. The jury returned guilty on all counts. Sentencing set for June 18, 2012. One ledger entry was still redacted, and it named a buyer with influence. Sentencing began June 18, 2012, in Bisbee. Judge Meredith Cole adopted the jury's findings and imposed life without parole on the felony murder count. She added consecutive terms on racketeering, trafficking, and evidence tampering. The order included criminal forfeiture of Hale's South Range, the quarantine barn, and associated water rights. A restitution fund was established for families identified through the ledger and partial DNA matches. The court set a 30-day deadline for victims to file verified claims with supporting records. Within weeks, deputies sealed the ranch house and catalogued contents. DPS logged the microcassettes, the boot shop records, and the donor letters. A new warrant covered the feed pad and the West Mesa. Ground-penetrating radar showed 2 more anomalies. Coring on July 2, 2012, recovered plastic fibers and diatoms consistent with the original concrete mix. By August 9, a second set of remains was tentatively linked to a 1989 missing adult from Santa Cruz County. DNA was partial, but kinship statistics supported inclusion. Hale filed a notice of appeal on June 28. He alleged improper admission of audio, prejudicial joinder, and cumulative error. On October 15, 2013, the Arizona Court of Appeals affirmed. The panel ruled the spectrographic analysis met Rule 702 and the joinder served judicial economy without unfair spillover. A petition for review was denied in March 2014. Federal habeas followed and failed in 2016. The Ninth Circuit cited strong independent corroboration. Civil actions unfolded in parallel. Nora's family filed a wrongful death suit in Cochise County on July 23, 2012. Discovery obtained bank ledgers, hauling invoices, and photographs of the quarantine barn's interior. A settlement created a memorial fund and required the county to preserve the case archive for public viewing. The ranch became a restricted conservation tract managed by the state land department. Tours were limited to researchers with credentials. The redacted ledger entry did not unseal. The Attorney General opened a grand jury in Phoenix in 2014 to examine procurement fraud and potential buyers. Subpoenas went to a charitable foundation and a private air service. No indictments were announced. Requests under public records law were denied due to ongoing proceedings. The page stayed blank in public copies. In 2020, DPS revisited the Box Canyon after a drought lowered sediment. They pulled a camera body from a crevice, intact enough to image. One erased name still controls who can speak and who cannot.